So, what inspired you to write about hedge witchery?
The book is kind of like my love note to my own path. So it's kind of been everything I've been practicing and learning about over the years. And the book is kind of like the point that I've arrived at right now. So it is a mixture of things that I have learned and then personal gnosis and things that inspire me and things that I find fascinating and interesting. Because I was never really one that liked the labels of witchcraft. I was just like, well, it's just me. And so I was like, well, the thing I gravitate towards most, I guess, is hedge witch, that lovely mixture of nature and spirit work. So that's kind of how the book came to be. And I hadn't really seen like a modern version of what it meant to be a hedge witch. So I was like, okay, I'll write it.
Well, you dive into this finding the sacred landscape within oneself.
Mhm.
Please explain what that means.
Okay. So it started off with me being obsessed with the idea that we all had like an inner garden. And then this kind of grew into the realization it was more like a grove because the sacred grove is something that you find within Celtic paths where people they went to the outside world, and they also went into sacred groves, places surrounded by trees. And I was like, well, if the outer world exists, surely the inner world exists. As we go into places in meditation, what would that look like? What would that be from a Celtic perspective? And so that inner landscape and kind of creating that image within your mind when you go in deep within yourself within meditation is kind of like an anchor within the spiritual world within the self, and is something that can change and grow and blossom and bloom and be in cycle with who you are and where you are in life. And I really like that idea because I was like, I think that gives us a place within ourselves to co-create with spirit, with the universe, with God, with goddess, however we see that energy. Yeah, and I love trees and I love the idea of the sacred grove. And so it strongly resonates with me and comes through in visualization really, really strongly.
Right, it's also safe. It feels safe. When
Hmm.
it's a theme throughout the book. And so I kept saying to myself, well, it's very druid-ish, which we will get to,
Hmm.
and also safe. It's a safe, sacred space. You also talk a lot about shape-shifting.
Hmm.
And I was really floored with your chapter on the crow. And I just wanted to touch a little bit on your personal relationship with this bird.
Well, some of that comes from the Morrigan. A lot of that comes from the Morrigan. I mean, how can you not love crows? They're so amazing. They're funky little death omens. I love them. Um, Maybe it's a witch thing, being obsessed with creatures that other people are like a little bit funny with or fear a little bit. Because you notice witches really love all the spooky liminal little creatures. I think it might be a witch indicator. But I've always found them really, really fascinating. And then as I sort of expanded that into spiritual practice, into the idea of shapeshifting, the crow is the first thing that came up for me through the Morrigan. And I was always quite obsessed with the idea of what masks really were. And the first time the Morrigan showed up, she was wearing like a full crow mask. So I didn't fully know if it was her or a messenger from her. And this was the point because she likes to be mysterious and tricksy and make you figure it out. So a lot of my sort of first meetings had crow associations with them. And so it was very much like this liminal energy spirit that appeared at gateways, appeared at doorways when I was getting into deeper spiritual understanding, both with the Morrigan and with my own practice in regards to shapeshifting. So the first time the Morrigan sort of went through this idea with me is that she showed up as a giant crow in meditation, this far away from my face, which is very disconcerting, by the way, when you go into meditation and you're expecting, oh, nice trees, nice, calm, relaxing meditation. And no, there's a crow this far away from your face. That you're like, And then it was to switch. So it was like my consciousness switched into the crow. And that was my introduction to the idea of shapeshifting in the spiritual realm, my very first experience. And I love crows anyway. I love the mythology, I love the stories about them. And so I'm always really excited about crow energy. And so it had to be in the book.
Right. It's funny when you say so close, I always
Yeah.
feel that that's always the sign that it's really the goddess. I
Yeah.
don't know why, because it's so big or so close. You talk about the importance of shadow work and healing with the dark goddess. Can we talk a little
Mhm.
bit about that? I mean, usually people will say, oh, shadow work has to be part of the dark goddess path or her theme or trope. But here in the book, it's a little bit different. You go through a whole bunch of other spirits and energies and tree spirit, all other
Mhm.
things, but then you really kind of nail it down with this, the dark goddess, shadow work has to be done. Why
Mhm.
is it so important that we have to get through this, that we have to get through our shadow work?
So for me, shadow is very much about embracing all the parts of yourself, and that is sovereignty within the self, which is very important in the dark goddess path. So shadow work is about healing yourself, but it's also about accepting all the parts of ourselves that have been shamed or ridiculed and have been pushed down and are hurting, and we're ignoring them. And often, when sort of shadow is poking at us from a place of pain, we might not be fully aware what's going on. So when we do shadow work, we're kind of looking headlong into the void that is ourself, kind of thing. And there's something about so empowering about shadow work because the only person that you can truly have control over is yourself, right? The only person that you can truly heal is yourself. Hopefully, in healing yourself, you can help others to heal themselves. And hopefully, in empowering yourself, you can show how that is done and talk about how that is done. But unless we do the work within ourselves, we're kind of cutting ourselves off from our own self, our own power, and in a way, our own connection to dark goddesses such as Morrigan.
You have a lot of druid themes here too.
Hmm.
I felt. Um, did were you influenced by a druid path as well?
I do wonder whether or not I was druidic in a past life because I've only just started studying druidism a year ago. And obviously the book was completed before that. And then I was like, oh, oh. And then there's references to the Morrigan being a druid as well. And I'm like, oh. And it's one of those weird synchronicities that happens to you after the fact. And then you're like, okay. Um, so what you learn about Druidism when you're learning it through OBOD, through the official Druids of the UK, is much, much deeper and their mysteries than when anything you might have read in books around. So, so I was sat there like, oh dear. I've somehow tapped into a lot of similar themes without knowing I was doing that. Okay. But that kind of convinced me that maybe this is something that happened in a past life, like the trees and the groves and things like that, is clearly very druidic in nature as well. It's also Hedge Witch aligned and Celtic aligned, so there is crossover between the two paths clearly.
It's very, very otherworldly because you talk about the flow of Alwyn.
Hmm.
You talk about in your book you write about this. So why is that so important to one's being? Why did you mention that? Why did you feel you had to put it in the book?
Okay. Okay. So Arwen is the energetic universal force of inspiration for anybody who doesn't know what that is. And that's how the Druids term it, like it's a universal force that you can tap into. And for me, it fed into my personal hedge witchery and my relationship with the Morrigan through a very bardic inspiration. So I've always been very poetic in nature, and I love poetry and words and the spoken word. I love songs and divination through words, and all that kind of wordsmithing comes naturally to me, and I adore it. And that feeds into the Morrigan worship because she is a goddess of prophecy and poetry, and that turns up in her mythology. So a lot of my witchy life was quite vocal, like playing with vibration, playing with that side of how we speak things into being and the power of the voice. That came into it really, really strongly, and it became part of my foundation for my spiritual path. And I couldn't separate it from the Celtic witchcraft at all.
But the book to me is you got to really sit with it. It's not a quick cookbook where you're going to be like, "Oh, let's try this today." You really need to commit to it because the way it is laid out is really a journey, and I
Mm.
think each chapter kind of builds upon itself, and it really is deep, serious work. Yeah, we talk about crows and trees and stuff, but there's some heavy stuff there that if you're going to go through it, it's just probably best to commit yourself to the book. What do you hope readers will get from reading this?
I really hope that readers find a little bit of wonder again, because for me, witchcraft, particularly Celtic Hedge Witchcraft, is all about the connection to the natural world and finding the wonder in it and finding the magic in it and finding a place to anchor in and ground in and feel a part of something and a world which is feeling more and more discombobulated, more and more fragmented, more and more hostile and argumentative. And within the book, there is the idea of both ecosystem in the physical sense and then the spiritual ecosystem. And to me, that's the idea like we're always connected to nature, to one another, to the spirits, to deity. And sometimes we really need to feel that way again, especially when we're being bombarded daily with messages of division and hostility. And the world is a scary, terrifying place sometimes. But it's good to come back to the realization that the world is also beautiful.